You're very welcome back. The polling station is back. And of course, a lot of us and a lot of you will be fans of Succession. And fans of Succession will obviously have been watching the Dominion settlement with Fox. Really, really incredible stuff for the Murdoch Empire. Although, as William Kedjanyi and Paul Krishnamurty will understand, this puts the polling station at deep peril going forward. Can we even continue with this show? What can we say anymore? Because obviously we always shoot from the hip. We're also going to talk UK polls, and my light has just gone off here. I'll put the light back on. And Paul hasn't been really kind of immersed in it of late, but we are coming up to Greek and Turkish elections. So we might have a little bit of an update from that. This Dominion settlement, William. If you if you don't watch Succession, what the hell is wrong with you? But secondly, this settlement was incredible. And basically, the premise for this was Fox News during the election and after the election was peddling the falsity through its presenters effectively that Dominion's election machines had been effectively faulty / rigged, yada, yada. And there was a settlement out of court for a cool sum during the week.
Yeah, $787 million to be precise, the largest settlement in history. Now, you might be wondering, Succession fan or not, why does this matter when it comes to political betting? What possible relevance could it have to any bets we could have? And it's going to have a big effect on the GOP nomination and the next presidential election going forward. Now, you might ask, why is that? It's pretty simple. Fox News is one of America's biggest news channels. It's got a presence everywhere. And they, along with many of their top hosts, basically went all in on the lie that Joe Biden had stolen the 2020 election and that Donald Trump had been robbed. Now, they've been forced to back down on this at a huge expense to avoid essentially a really messy trial where Rupert Murdoch, Tucker Carlson, Sean Hannity, all those types would have had to come out basically and testify, and all of the findings that we've already had would have been put into the open. Now, this puts Donald Trump in a really difficult position because Fox is probably still his number one vehicle in terms of not just rallying up his base also, but running any sort of media interference, which matters an awful lot in American politics. It's almost as big as the newspapers are here. And with Fox unable to go down that route, he's lost essentially the biggest outlet for one of his biggest conspiracies. But he's still using it, and it's still part.
What? I mean, you said that without even a smile. One of his biggest conspiracies.
One of his many conspiracies. We've been talking quite a lot about how his base and the sort of floating voters that may have approved of him on the economy, that may not be so naturally inclined to vote for a Democrat, whether it be Joe Biden, whether it be somebody else, and the difference between that. This makes it even harder. He's currently hardening as a GOP nomination favorite. He's 4-7 with Star. I think he might be a bit short on the exchanges. I'm not sure. But in terms of the general, the pivot he's got to make is harder. And now Fox News, they cannot go with this again, not to mention, of course, their future legal perils. So suddenly, his rock and a hard place situation has become steel and granite. He can't do that on Fox anymore. Fox can't go with that anymore. The baseline now is at least $800 million should they decide to try and pull this down the line. So Trump is solidifying his base, but making winning the general all the more harder.
Okay, everything William said there, Paul, it's hard to believe that he's even actually saying this on a reputable organized, organ or whatever, because it's all true though. And somehow actually not being able to tell outright lies and downright lies is something that Fox has to face. And literally, this is something out of Succession. And by the way, you do look a bit like Michael Landon in Highway to Heaven with that lovely lighting in the background. Kind of a daisy figure.
Well, some say that, Johnny. So I couldn't possibly comment. But no, look. I mean, this is an incredible. I think this is a really profound moment. I'm very loath, having lived through the phone hacking trial and all of that. I'm very loath to say this is the end of Rupert Murdoch because we've been there before, right? But it's very hard to see where they go from here, Fox. And let's not understate this. the Murdoch machine has probably had a greater political influence on the Western world in the last 40, 50 years
than anything.
Any politician, definitely, right? And, you know, even when you go to America, you see it's even wider than you might think because, you know, okay, people have cable TV. Some people have cable TV and watch this nonsense. But then you get in a taxi in a random place and the local news is syndicated through Fox. So they are hearing this nonsense on a loop everywhere. Now, I don't know where they go from here. Because as Will says, I mean, what, are they really going to keep doing this? Are they really going to keep exposing themselves to $800 million lawsuits and all the humiliation that comes with it? You wouldn't have thought so, right? And I'm quite sure that in Murdoch world, they have decided somewhere we'll try and drop Trump. But as we've seen, as we saw indeed during that dramatic election, they can't drop him. They're not in that position, right? Trump has such a hold over his particular hardcore voters that they will switch to Newsmax or OAN or whatever new crazy right-wing conspiracy news channel there is. So either Fox and Fox can't pivot to being a centre ground, moderate, serious news organisation.
This is the thing, because Fox knew all along. Fox knew right at the heart of this that this was absolute nonsense. But it was literally not getting the truth in the way of good story, or not getting actual facts in the way of ratings. And it was proven that once they started to kind of climb down, the ratings dropped. How did we get to this though in the free world?
Well, I mean, we got to that in the same way we have in lots of other very terrible respects, by being open to oligarchy and to foreign money buying up our politics and our media. You know, I would have thought in a functioning democracy there would be restrictions on who could buy media companies. Would they be a fit and proper person? Well, Rupert Murdoch's clearly not a fit and proper person through the way he's acted over many, many decades. And yet they have been allowed to. They've been allowed to expand. You know, it's a systemic problem we have. The same we have with oligarchs and criminals buying football clubs.
Exactly.
You know, it's a problem that we have. But it is a big problem for Trump, and because Trump is not going to stop. He's not going to stop pushing the election lie. No way. I don't think. I mean, okay, it's a lie, but I suspect that Trump truly believes it in his heart of hearts.
Really?
I think Trump believes whatever comes out of his mouth at any given moment is 100% true. Doesn't matter if it's completely different to what he thought a minute ago, but I think his ego is so big that whatever he says is true in his mind, right? He will convince himself he has that ability. And so that
is incredible psychoanalysis. I'm really intrigued with what you're saying there, because, you know, you have to try to understand somebody who lies as much as that.
Well, I mean, he can't be acting, surely, all the time. He would slip out of character sometimes, but you know, I've watched Trump religiously for years, and I've come to the conclusion that he is completely insane, right? That he's really dangerously insane, right? He has severe narcissism, and he's not going to stop. So therefore, what happens throughout? Let's assume that he is the nominee. Let's assume that this attempt to siphon it off and say it doesn't work. What are they going to do? That, you know, all year long, Trump is going to be effectively like his supporters threatening civil war or another January 6th, not accepting the last election result, let alone the next one, right? What are Fox going to do? They're going to. If I assume that they will, if they're not going to report that, they will collapse as a business.
So, cut to the chase. Then, is this a dent to Trump's hopes in 2024?
Definitely.
Okay.
Definitely. I can't believe that Joe Biden has not shortened up in the last few weeks, really, despite everything. You know, he's 3-1 on for the nomination, which I think is probably a lock. And yet he's 2-1 for the presidency. So that suggests that he's going to be the outsider. No way is the outsider against Trump. No way.
Lovely use of the word lock as well, by the way, a bit of American colloquialism. I'm a big fan. Of course, we didn't mention Joe Biden's trip to Ireland, William, because I wasn't on last week, and we just couldn't arrange it. Got to call out the Times on that little cartoon about Joe Biden being mimicked as some sort of a leprechaun type figure drinking Guinness. A caricature that I don't think went down that well over here, particularly when the Sunday Times has an Irish edition.
No, but all week, the worst people, personal opinion here, in British media have just been losing their minds over the fact that Biden went and had a nice time. He didn't do anything. Listen, I know people got upset at the Jerry Adams selfie, and there was the black and tans gaff or not gaff, you decide which, when he went to the pub and did that speech. But the vast majority of it has just been president with Irish roots goes and has nice time in Ireland. And it has turned
At a very elderly age, by the way.
at a very elderly age, and it has turned a lot of people in this country completely insane. I actually went, and I don't know why I did this. I'm too online, as you
You are.
asked you to on Twitter. I went, and I think on day 2 or 3 of the visit, GB News posted about it. I want to say 15 times in the entirety of the day. It was ceaseless from like 4 until 12. The Irish homecoming thing for Biden was probably more of an emotional trip and a chance to actually go and stretch his legs and have some fun. He looked well. I thought the ending speech, the Mayor for Sam speech, was actually not a bad little pointer as to his general health and well-being, which is that he's fine, right? He seems to be in good form. He's on pretty good terms with himself. He's still got it as a speaker, even at this age, and I wouldn't have any particular worries about it. In terms of what it meant for Europe or whatever, it was probably much bigger for Ireland than it was for the UK, with regards to Good Friday Agreement. But in general, I'd be inclined to agree with Paul, which is that I don't think you're having any sleepless nights now if you're bigging at free on for his nomination.
Yeah. Okay. So briefly on this, Paul, you're hardening on Biden, obviously, despite the fact he's age. If you don't know the Mayo reference, by the way, Mayo haven't won All Ireland since I think 1951. They lost a final in 96, 97, 2004, 2006, 2012, 2013, 2016, including a replay 2 games, 2017, 2020, and 2021. I'm sorry, Mayo fans, a lot of people in Britain wouldn't realise it's a curse. Apparently, look it up on Google. So Biden was channeling his inner kind of Mayo hardship there. But it went down very well, Paul. I think he pulled off a blinder here.
Yeah, I do. I mean, like Will, I've been just watching the madness over here, with not surprised, but just what can you do but laugh? I mean, we are having we are, for many years we've been having a complete nervous breakdown as a country, and we cannot deal with. I mean, so he took a selfie with Jerry Adams, right? I mean, the First Minister of Northern Ireland is from Sinn Féin, right? Joe Biden sings rebel songs or IRA songs. This is known. This is not some part of his history that's suddenly come to the fore. He's been in American politics for decades, and we know this stuff.
Where was GB News when King Charles was all over Sinn Féin and basically snubbed the DUP?
Yes, exactly. Something like that. Really clear visuals that the world, we are not in the 1980s anymore, guys. You know, the world has moved on, right? And that Charles situation was just incredible. It was incredible to watch that. And yet it's just an awkward truth. And we in Britain have a addiction to avoiding awkward truths on everything political. And it's one of those.
I think this has been a phenomenal insight into Paul, actually, so far in this show, and I'm enjoying it immensely. Let's get on to the latest polls, William. UK voting intention. This is as of a couple of days ago now, a few days ago. Labour 49 -2, Conservatives 26, up 1% in fairness. And I don't think I think the three of us, despite how sceptical we are, I think in general we don't think Rishi Sunak is doing too badly. Liberal Democrats are up 2. Greens up 1 at 6%, Lib Dems at 11, and they're actually having mild kind of alterations to the betting market ahead of the next election. I do wonder, William, is there a situation where Rishi Sunak will be under a little bit more scrutiny between now and then, in the sense of what are you actually offering us here? If Keir Starmer will be under a little bit more scrutiny if Rishi Sunak continues to do a steady job and stays out of trouble, and we have the RAB case coming up, but maybe there'll be a little bit more of a spotlight on what Keir Starmer actually has to offer.
Yeah, I think you are seeing that on certain policy areas, also just in general, the argument for voting Labour, which in some cases will have to differ from we're not the Tories. As strong a case as that is by now, I don't think they can rely on that too much. And to be fair, I think in some elements of the Labour Party, there's an acknowledgement they need to offer some things. But I think at the moment, they're still very much locked into the competency and brand struggle. We've seen some polls narrow. This is because voters who had previously voted Tory in 2019 are now turning from don't knows back towards the Tories. There are different reasons for this. Sunak is a social conservative who can appeal to those instincts and do so very well. And he also comes without the chaos of Johnson and Truss. Also, again, he's doing, I think he's doing the job in a way that Johnson just was never capable of, and that Truss never even gave herself the chance to do. So, like, there's pickup from that, and you can see that in the personal ratings. There's still a detachment between Sunak's personal ratings and the brand of the Tories, etc.
Which is fair enough.
Yeah, entirely fair enough. But we have seen a move, both exchanges, both fixed odds. With Star Sports now, it's 4-5 a Labour majority, 6-4 hung Parliament. And the Tories are back into 3-1 to win the most seats. So you can see there's been a change. There's a long way to go. I think Labour are still very much in the driving seat, namely because Sunak is going steady, but he's got lots of obstacles to come down the line. His big election promises will be an issue for him if he can't achieve them. This is in bumps down the line. The Dominic Raab case, by the way, there's talk that might come today.
Right.
And
we're recording on what are we, Thursday afternoon here?
It's Thursday morning, 11 in the morning on Thursday. A lot of people are saying it might drop today, so that we'll look at it, make a decision. He's in a really tough spot. He's close to Raab, but based on what's been briefed, and this is only what's been briefed, I'm not making any legal allusions here. It would be really hard to keep him. Really, really hard to keep him, and multiple people would quit, and then you would have a whole bad image thing. So he's got stuff like that down the line. Let's see how he avoids it. But I think Labour's lead is narrowing a little bit in certain polls, but it still, I think, remains functionally very solid.
So Paul, it wasn't a big poll. We had a poll in Ireland in recent weeks where Sinn Féin was put on 37%. Well ahead of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael put together, which is off the charts in terms of historical resonance. And you could basically have an entirely left wing, if you want to call Sinn Féin left wing, which I'm not even sure about, an entirely left wing parliament. So it wasn't anywhere near as big as that. The one thing though, Paul, Keir Starmer is ahead of a Labour Party that itself, to me, is built on a fairly flaky foundation that have not been the Conservatives, that have not been left wing. So maybe there will be a little bit of a narrowing of the gap in the meantime.
Well, we've talked a lot about this potential, right? And I don't think anything's really happened in the poll is all that dramatic. I mean, Sunak is, as Will said, the far more competent, less chaotic Tory than the Johnson Truss thing. And that's how Tories win elections, by being the party of competence and stability, supposedly. So it's not surprising to see them picking up a few of the voters that have lost weight. But Labour are still solidly in the 40s, right? And many angles to this. First of all, I would just say, I say this as someone who's virtually an expat now. This is a right-wing country. England is a right-wing country, right? And this is the problem that the left of the Labour Party never understand. They
right-wing in what regards?
They are right-wing economically. They don't believe, you say tax the rich, and they go, but the rich will leave the country. This is a common... Look, I'm not going to quote politics. People say all sorts of things in polls. I'm talking about my life, talking to all sorts of people over 30, 40 years about politics, ordinary people, not politicos, right? People are instinctively right-wing in this country. It's not just, and that is probably because the system is kind of rigged towards the right wing, especially the media. And go back to Rupert Murdoch, and then you could add the Daily Mail and the Daily Express to that, right? The right wing have an outside influence over our political conversation. And the only time in my lifetime that Labour have been able to neutralise that was when they appeased them under Tony Blair, right? And that's what Starmer's doing. I'm not saying it's a defensible strategy. People who say Starmer is dishonest, but there's pretty much proof that he's a flip-flopper and all that. But I think he is playing a textbook game of how you win the election in Britain, right? I think the big ticket items will come, right? And they will make a difference. And I just think the economic fundamentals, inflation's running at 10%, right? Mortgages are going through the roof. People I speak to who have mortgages are really struggling now. And these are the decisive swing voters in Britain, right? I think that it's going to be very, very hard for the Conservatives to get above 33, 35%. That is their core. And
But
thus,
briefly, 6-4 hung parliament looks value to me.
well, it was 9-4 the other week. And the other thing, of course, something has happened since in the last few weeks, which has probably got a bigger impact than the Labour Tory thing, which is the SNP collapse. The SNP look absolute toast. I wonder whether he'll make the election, Humza Yousaf, right? And we may well be in a situation now where Labour are gaining 30 plus seats in Scotland. That very much changes the majority maths.
Have you changed your view on Nicola Sturgeon?
In what respect?
In the respect of, did she kind of know what was going on here? Did she jump at the right time? You say obviously she held the party together. Now she's left anyway, and you can't necessarily blame her entirely for this, but she's left. You say toast. This is an unbelievable turning of events in the last 6 weeks.
Well, so the point here is politics, party politics, internal party politics is incredibly dodgy and corrupt. If you want to follow the money about political donations through any party, you're going to find skullduggery. The point with Sturgeon is that from the moment it seems that Alex Salmond was, taken down, if you like, there has been a move against her. There's been a faction fighting against her, and all of that has come to ruin her. I understand why she left at the time. She did the right thing. I don't think this affects whether she was a good First Minister or not. I think she was a good First Minister. But I do also think that she was probably the glue holding together that SNP coalition. And without her and with everything going on, they could easily go back to where they were in the 90s, just distant second everywhere.
Okay, William, we are meandering a bit, but that's what we should be doing in the polling station, because we are going from, one part of Britain to another. This has repercussions for United Ireland as well, because United Ireland, for me, is very much predicated upon, or largely predicated, I think, upon the very, very genuine close relationship between the Ulster Scots background of Northern Unionists and Scotland. And if the SNP vote falls apart, I don't really see United Ireland following. Discuss.
Yeah, I think the one thing with all independence movements, actually, and I've more sort of been moved to Paul's thinking by hearing him lay out the case, is that because of the difficulties of Brexit, right? I'm not making a judgment on whether it was good or bad here, right? Because of the process of Brexit and how messy it was, right? And all of the negatives for the people who wanted to remain, and also how unhappy a lot of Leavers are with it. I think it's actually done real damage to succession causes. When it happened originally, I thought this puts the union in more peril than anything. But actually, for these things to go through,
that was a beautiful faux pas. You mean secession rather than succession causes, I presume?
Yes.
Yes. Because we've had a few succession causes today.
Oh my gosh, where's my Tom Wamsgans jacket when I really need it? But in all seriousness, I thought originally Brexit would be hell on earth for the union. I don't think it's been good for the union. But as Paul made the case, to actually get these sort of big referenda over the line, you need to win over people who aren't fighters for the cause or whatever. You need to win people who wouldn't be nationalists, who will be more floating voters, in the same way you would for an election. And I just think very few people around the UK will see what's happened with Brexit, and then who aren't already game for Welsh independence or Scottish independence, or potentially a United Ireland, albeit I think there are differences there with Ireland especially, and think now's the time to go, or I want to go, unless they already felt that. So
do you agree with Paul on the SNP being toast?
Yeah. At least
how is this? This has literally happened in the space of a few weeks. Well, okay.
Yeah, at least for the near future. Well, first of all, listen, I promise you, I'm not doing this for a bit. I promise you, there was not enough succession planning. clearly.
Mhm.
And the departure was clearly rushed. There were clearly things under the surface. I have to admit, I was completely oblivious to that. I think many people that were just not right. Their image, anyway, with all but their best supporters, has been totally trashed and tarnished. I mean, I'm turning on the 6 o'clock news about once a week to see a senior SNP member being arrested. That's leading the 6, which is massive. And yeah, I think, listen, Hamza Yusuf, the world has fallen in on him. He will do well, frankly, to get to the next election with a party and an image that you can sell. So it's definitely changed things with regards to the vote overall and the massive majority. I think with regards to any anti-post strategies, I think there's a lot of changes potentially ahead. And I might be inclined to wait a month or two and see where things are. See if this trend, which we've seen in a couple of pollsters, and we got to remember some weight differently. So 11 points with Delta, it might be a bit different than, say, 15 with Redfield and Wilton. And let's also see how things go economically too into the summer.
Yeah, I just find it absolutely fascinating. I mean, I don't know where Brexit has left. The post-Brexit acceptance and setting in period where Britain now decides, okay, and the UK decides, okay, this is our future now. This is where we are in the world. How that'll play out politically, I don't know. Paul, you are close to the situation in Greece and Turkey, both having elections in May. We have to not forget as well the victims of the earthquake. It's almost kind of been forgotten in the narrative. It really wasn't long ago at all, and Turkey's still reeling from that, and politics almost seems churlish. But I do find this Turkish election really fascinating to call.
It's very fascinating. The question also is, will it be straight? Because Erdogan does have a history of allegedly stuffing ballot boxes, right, to get things over the line. Personally, I'm sceptical that Erdogan goes. I think if he does go, what odds of recount? What odds an attempt to seize power? Right. So I certainly think the people betting odds on his opponent are taking a huge risk. I don't see it that way. The Greek election is a lot less volatile. The only issue there is we're going to need 2 elections. It's going to be a second election because no one's going to get a majority first time round. And what it's going to boil down to, I think, again, is what PASOK do, the centre-left party, the Labour Party of Greece. Because there is a possibility, it's a lot more logical that they would go in with Syriza, the left party. But it's not 100% certain that is the case. And so they could end up backing the centre-right New Democracy. My feeling, though, is still that it will be a Syriza-led coalition.
We will end with William's take and what we're looking forward to. But I just did want to get you, because I haven't really spoken to you about this in a while, and there is sadly an element of war fatigue on this. Vladimir Kara-Murza's what did he get? 25 years in opposition. Obviously, 25 years in jail. He's been in opposition. Seems to take his punishment in a rather kind of placid manner, as you do in Putin's Russia. What's the latest, Paul?
Well, I mean, that story is just typical Putinism. It's the sort of thing that, in a way, he was a Boris Nemtsov supporter, and Boris Nemtsov, of course, just was shot, right? They didn't even bother imprisoning him. I don't know how anybody outside Russia is still making excuses for him. I find that just the most bizarre thing ever, and a testimony to the powers of propaganda. I do think Putin is in trouble. I noticed Oleg Deripaska a couple of weeks ago come out and say that basically the country had been ruined. Now, Deripaska is as much of a Putin ally as there is. So, and he did it, and no one's killed him yet. So that does make me think there is some kind of succession planning going on there.
Yet more succession planning.
Keep on doing that, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think the wider trend there is a much wider trend there, which is about the far right, or the organised crime global syndicate, as I like to call it, attacking journalists. This is not new. I mean, the 2 winners of the Nobel Peace Prize were journalists who have had their lives constantly threatened for years in the Philippines. I noticed a story come out of Oklahoma 2 days ago, which hasn't made national news, which was the local Republicans and the sheriff talking openly, plotting openly to hire a hitman to murder journalists, right? And to talk about bring about lynching for black people, right? You know, there's a real threat. It's been there for years. Russia is the most crystallized version of that. It worries me deeply that people in the West don't seem to acknowledge it's happening.
We're not flawless, William, but I do think Ireland is not a bad place to live. What's your last word for you?
Yeah, first of all, I love Ireland, and I've only been back there in February. I've already been missing it hugely, so hopefully I can return in the future. My takeaways from this week would
It
be
is one of my ambitions, by the way, to get you far more exposed to Irish media, and I am working on it because I think we need your youth and your voice and your your credibility as well.
That's far too kind of you. My takeaways for this week would be do keep watching the polls here in Britain to see if any trends are emerging, and also to be wary of how different polling companies are using methodologies, because that will give you different results and leads before you move with a bet. I would say a couple of prices I think might possibly grow bigger, and I wouldn't be say if I was wanted to oppose Labour or whatever, I think you'll get the chance to do it in a better, more favourable situation, because I do think there are issues down the line for Sunak, which will have to navigate and do so with aplomb. In America, my outlook would be keep an eye on Morning Consult, how the voters are responding. Does Trump's lead keep growing despite this? And then also just take a snapshot of general election trends, etc., and see where those leads are and see if anything correlates, because you'll get a pretty good indicator of what the man in the street is thinking, who's in the independent column, which is very important for a general, because I think it's looking more like, at the moment, particularly with DeSantis having his own struggles, we could get Trump versus Biden the rematch. And that would be a very interesting betting market this time around too.
I think it'd be good fun as well. I'm going to actually have the last word, not Michael Landon or William Kedjanyi. If you're not really familiar with Irish politics, basically since the formation of the state, which is 100 years ago, two parties absolutely dominated, like Celtic and Rangers, basically absolutely dominated. But we now have a situation where Sinn Féin has more of a vote, and Sinn Féin has never been in government in the Republic, has more of a vote than the two of them put together, and could put together a left-wing coalition entirely, if you want to call left-wing Sinn Féin, if it so wanted. So this is a promise to all of you out there, including our legion of Irish fans. We're going to have a special on Ireland very, very soon, and we'll have some special guests, and who knows, Star Sports, which leads the way with political betting, may even bet on the next election, because that is a hard one to call. We'll be back next week.